All right, what is up? It is your boy Gimpzilla coming at you with another gaming strategy video. This week we are going to be looking at a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons from the Dungeon Master's perspective. I'll start right here at the top of the video. 100% spoiler video. This is intended and aimed at Dungeon Masters running the White Plume Volume module, and it's just going to be some of my thoughts and interactions as I ran the dungeon, and possibly some tips to help DMs really make this place come alive. So let's just dive right in. I'm going to be dividing the video into essentially three parts, starting a little bit of my history, shifting over to the storyline and story arcs of this dungeon, and then third and finally, a little bit of fight tactics to really help your creatures fully come alive. So, even when it first came out, this was considered a funhouse dungeon. So, all of my approaches to this have been, lighthearted for the most part. At the making of this video, I have ran this place 5 times. I have done all as one-shots. I play mostly on Roll20, and I'm mostly playing with random party members as well. I did complete the entire dungeon when I first learned it. I did it like a crazy 8-hour session over my weekend, and ended up running the entire module, and I don't recommend that. That was pretty taxing on me, and I feel like the mental stamina made me slip on a couple boss battles, and they weren't as epic as they essentially could be. Um, so yeah, I have a lot of experience with it, mostly on Roll20, and then the way that I specifically run this dungeon would be a 3-part adventure, essentially doing each of the 3 wings. So again, assuming that you guys have read the module, if you have not, again, I would recommend you check that out and then possibly revisit the video. So the first fork that the players are going to come to are the 3 forks. And that's how I divide my dungeon essentially. I have the west wing, the north wing, and the east wing. Each one takes roughly about 3 hours if played properly. Um, and yeah, that would be my recommendation on timing and pacing to begin with. The other note that I would have just before you even get into the dungeon here, this is the 5e edition running from Tales of the Yawning Portal, and the recommended level in the book is level 8. When I did send level 8 party members in here, a lot of the fights felt extremely trivial. I'm not 100% sure because I'm kind of a forever DM, so I don't play a ton of player characters, to be 100% honest with you. But I personally bumped everyone's level down to 7 instead of 8, as the manual suggests, and I feel like that's the sweet spot. It's starting to strike more fear in the players. Level 8, they were just like a little too confident. Just one additional feat or something like that kind of pushed them over the edge. So that'd be my first kind of general recommendation from my experience playing it, would be to shift the levels down from 7 to 8, and then also to break this dungeon into essentially 3 parts, west, north, and east. So with that kind of out of the way, I'd like to shift gears and kind of lightly cover the storyline of the module. I did say at the beginning of the video here, this is regarded as a funhouse dungeon, which many people would think, okay, I'm just, it's Tomb of Horrors, I'm going to stick my head into a Sphere of Annihilation or something like that. But I would really emphasize it doesn't have to be like that. I actually very much enjoy the storyline of White Plume Mountain. So the background, Karaptis, again, I'm going to let you guys read the module if you need more details, but essentially an evil wizard has lied dormant for over 1,000 years, until recently, when 3 priceless legendary artifacts up and vanished from the nobles that held them. The only linking piece was a riddle that should be provided to your party at the beginning of the module. And essentially, players are brought into the dungeon to recover the 3 artifacts and escape with their lives. So this is meant to be played as a trap dungeon. And the main storylines that I play up here would first be exiting the dungeon, right? That's first and foremost. You want to make sure that as confident as your party is as they dance around the entire dungeon here, they're going to pick up all 3 artifacts. They're going to get fatigued, but the first kind of encounter I would emphasize from a story point perspective is going to be the Afridis at the exit. As soon as your party tries to leave, again, you should be switching on your omnipotent voice from the wizard Karaptis, really emphasizing to the players, why are you leaving at this point? You just killed all of my guardians. I think I need you to stay here a little bit longer and help guard these items at this point. So it makes perfect sense for him to have this tomb open and allow people to come in, relatively unhindered. Um, and then his goal here, the ultimate goal of Karaptis, is simply to trap the players in the dungeon and indoctrinate them and have them become slaves to the dungeon. Okay, so that's the main storyline here, as far as from a big bad's point of view, and Karaptis's point of view here is he is inviting players in with no intention of letting them out. So the way I would picture this dungeon is a massive fly trap, and then I'll go in more detail with the Afridi in the monster section. But the main storyline here is, again, they're let in, they are not let out. Um, the other storyline that I emphasize in my dungeon here is I do advise the party that there have been other parties that have gone before them into the dungeon, even very recently. And the reason why you would want to throw in a short story hook regarding additional party members is going to be Quisnef down here in room 27. And the other place that makes a lot of sense for is the Knights up here in room 24. So by emphasizing to your party that future adventurers or other adventurers had gone in before them, it's much easier to gain the party's trust on some of these NPC encounters. So just to focus on the Ani down here in the southern hallway. The first time I ran it, I was kind of just reading the book and going with exactly as it was scripted. But I didn't really leave that adventure hook saying that there was future parties in here. So when my party got here, I try and be like, oh, I've been trapped here forever and help me out. I need to get free. And absolutely none of them bought it. So moving forward, emphasizing that a future party had gone in, having this guy say, hey, my party was fed to the manticores. Like, you need to help me get out of here. Like, did you clear the path? Perfect. Thank you. And then having this halfling essentially join the party, and then only switching to the Ani presence when it's opportune to do so. Now they might be looking for the Blackrazor. I wouldn't even allude that this person has the Blackrazor until they have done their full switch. But again, the story hook of future parties that gone in before you is going to make that transition and your party accepting him into the group a whole lot easier. The other storyline I really like is, again, I say a group of 40 knights had walked in there to really kind of scare the party, thinking they might run into a group of 40 knights. And it goes relatively unanswered until they get back here. And this is a relatively hard fight the way I run it. So yeah, it makes sense that like a troop of knights would have come in as a massive squadron, and it would make sense that they can team up and take out a party if there's that many men together. So those are my main story hooks here. I guess the other final story hook that I did add, this is more for a one-shot than if you were going to run it as a campaign. But I did put a time limit on my dungeon. The storyline that I came up with is essentially the doors open to this place on the summer and winter solstice. And that's it. So they're open for 24 hours. Again, this was a one-shot specific, but I would send my party in and emphasize they are only allowed 2 short rests, and then they're forced to retreat. And the reason why I ended up switching my module like that, a lot of these fights are pretty simple, and you're going to find party members that simply just kind of take long rests between everything. So if they're trying to take long rests on you every single time, you really got to throw a hook in there. I personally don't really like random monster encounters. I think it just kind of slows down the experience. It slows down my story. So I normally aim for, hey, you just can't rest here, period, and try and give a story hook for that. So um, again, long rests are going to be the bane of you. I'll just quickly point out this invisible wall. I had a party coming through here, and they're like, okay, I'll just Tensor's Hut behind the invisible wall, and I'll get a long rest like whenever I want. And as a DM, like that's really hard to argue against because I mean it makes perfect sense. They're protected. They have the invisible wall. Why couldn't you necessarily rest here? So really consider what is going to push your players into the next room quickly, because that is how you really make these modules shine, is repeated encounters, not allowing the full rest, not allowing maximum spells, and just blowing up everything with fireballs. So you really want to try and find a way to hinder your players. And again, if that is roaming monsters, then it's roaming monsters, but I personally just do not like that. All right, perfect. So just to recap this section as far as storyline goes, the 3 story hooks that I'm personally using for this dungeon at this point in time. 1, you want to make sure they understand that future parties or other parties have entered this place. It gives an explanation for why they're going to run into friendly NPCs down here. Number 2, you want to emphasize the time. Again, too many rests in this dungeon will make it extremely trivial. So you really want to have some logical reason to be pushing these people into the next room without allowing infinite long rests. And then third and finally, the last story hook that you 100% want to emphasize are going to be these Afridi in the exit, making sure that players leaving this dungeon are going to have one hell of a fight on their hands. All right, so with that, I would like to just wrap up moving forward here into a couple encounters. And I guess we can just take this from the room kind of left to right. So these are just going to be some basic monster tactics and the most successful and fearful way that I found to run these creatures in my experience. So we'll just start on the left-hand side. Let me actually bring up this handout, because this is actually a very cool room. I do quite enjoy it. All right, excellent. So the Aquarium. This is kind of one of those encounters where players are going to walk in. They're going to kind of say, wow, like this is a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know if we can deal with it. And then upon a little bit of examination, they'll just kind of come up with some tactic to fly or jump or something to really just deal with the mana cores and nothing else in most cases. But the one thing I would emphasize in this room as far as tactics are concerned, these mana cores have the ability to shoot spines out of their tail. So you should absolutely be launching tail spikes at your players as they try and descend into the center of the aquarium, making them do their dexterity checks. Possibly falling into the water is always a fun interaction. But yeah, you really want to make sure that they do not have too much time to necessarily inspect it and come up with a plan. Personally, I had my Manticore firing tail spikes at them the second they walked in the door. So they were trying to figure out kind of what's the best way to attack this. We're getting shot as soon as we get in there. We don't have a lot of time to think. Just kind of keep that adrenaline high. The second encounter down on the left side, the Quesnef encounter with the Oni. I did mention that previously in my story hooks. You want to do your best to have this halfling join the party, continue with the party, and then betray the party when they are weak or when they request for a short rest. It's a perfect time to have this person flip and unleash all types of chaos. The knights are pretty self-explanatory. The book does a good job. You just kind of want to separate the party on 2 sides of the water, and then the module here gives you more than enough units to outnumber your opponents. I personally use flanking in my campaigns as well. So often with the number of enemies here, it's quite easy to get a flanking position on a rogue or possibly a weaker fighter, and very easy to bring somebody down in 24. I would just recommend to play that as the book suggests. A lot of these encounters you really can't save. Like number 20, they're just going to fireball all your golems every time. It doesn't really matter what you do to help them out. So the reason I would kind of bring up these mundane encounters is it puts an emphasis on your harder encounters, and you really want to make sure that on your taxing encounters that you are pushing it to the maximum throttle to try and waste as many player resources as possible. So let's switch gears. Let's go to the Northern Isle here, and the first room they're going to encounter is the Kelpie room. With the Kelpies, these are great units. I almost always DM rule that they're going to get one round of surprise attacks on the party because they essentially just blend in. They look like kelp on the bottom of the floor. Especially if players have failed to open the hatch in layer 9, not necessarily draining any water. This room is supposed to be deceptively dark. Players walk directly off the ledge, fall into the water, and then my Kelpies are going to immediately engage. Now, what makes the Kelpie encounter extra deadly is going to be their Drowning Hypnosis. Let me pull that up. Yeah, the Drowning Hypnosis. It's a DC 11 Wisdom save. And essentially how this reads here is the second they're charmed, they're going to go ahead and walk into the water or walk closer to the Kelpie. Drowning Hypnosis literally makes the character breathe underwater, so they're not holding their breath, which would imply that if they fail their wisdom check, they're immediately going to go down to single or unconscious, 0 hit points, at which point they remain unconscious equal to their constitution modifier. So for most people I play with, it's like 2, maybe 3 rounds. So Drowning Hypnosis is absolutely how you want to start the fight. I normally would start with 2 surprise Drowning Hypnosis on the first 2 party members in the room, and immediately try and take them out. Charm effects, grapple effects, those are your bread and butter as you're running encounters. That is the single best way to make something extremely scary for the NPCs. And if you think about it just from a number perspective, right? Like let's say I bring a party of 6 people down here. I get a successful Drowning Hypnosis. Again, best case scenario, but I get a successful Drowning Hypnosis on 2 party members. At that point, I've successfully brought the party's damage, like overall damage potential, down by more than 20% at that point. So, thinking about it in maybe some other video game terms that you've heard of, any kind of 20-25% reduction in player powder. And honestly, that's closer to like 30% if 2 land on 6. That is extremely powerful. Like I would take that buff in any kind of MMO or anything like that to increase my damage by 30%. So yeah, you really want to be playing up this Drowning Hypnosis. That's the best thing you can be doing with these Kelpies. Go for the grapples as best you can. I'm going to skip over the Snarla and Burkett encounter. Really just play it as the book says. If your party doesn't fall for the fire trap right here, then unfortunately those creatures are extremely easy for the group. It's difficult to make that fight engaging. The next fight I would focus on from a tactics perspective is going to be the Gigantic Crab. He's relatively easy to take down is what I would say. So to make this fight come alive as best as possible, again, be using your grapples. Make sure that if you do get a successful slam attack on the tank or something like that, you're going to go ahead and pick up a party member. And then I've ran it 2 ways. I've ran it where the crab takes the grappled party member, shoves his claw through the membrane around him, and simply drops the person off in the boiling water. And then the other thing that I like to do with the membrane bubble here is once the crab gets pretty low, I say like under 20%, I normally telegraph to my party that his eyes are shifting away and it looks like he's going to attack the bubble. And if the party can't kill him in that final round before he gets his next attack, I will absolutely have him walk over, pop the bubble, and that's his last desperation act to defend the room. So again, if you read the module, it says the crab is intelligent enough to not touch the walls. So I feel like in the same vein, the crab would be intelligent enough to break the walls if he knew that he was going to be dying for sure. So the crab is a fun fight. If you can pop the bubble on your party, it's absolute chaos. All right, and then let's shift over to the final wing over here on the east side. As far as this room goes, I'm gonna let you guys play it how you want. If you want to run all 9 encounters, I personally have never done that. Um, I normally give them the key after like maybe 1 or 2, just because again, it's just nonstop encounters. It depends on how interesting you can make your private encounters in like a small 30 by 30 room. Again, with the golems, kind of same deal. There's a lot of mundane fights, so I would just emphasize again that on your big bosses, you want to make them as big and bad as humanly possible. I'm not going to say anything about room 7. There's so much stuff online as far as how to run this, and every single DM that I've read like blogs on and stuff runs this room completely different from the next. So um, personally, what I did is just an initiative system, and then made it so that players could move a maximum of 2 discs per round, and then it was based on ability checks. So it ended up taking me like an hour and a half, but I do think it was a very fun encounter, and a lot of damage was dealt by the geysers, just by kind of forcing your party to slowly kind of climb across those. So just put some thought into how you would like to run room 7, the mud room. I think it's a very engaging room, and I read online people were putting monsters in there. I would emphasize, like, I don't think you need monsters to run it, and that's all I would say. The final fight down here on the west wing, this is actually, or the east wing, excuse me, this is one of my favorite fights. This is Scentmere, the Dwarven vampire. If you go through the lore here, Scentmere is absolutely a Dwarven vampire. There are holes in his door like Swiss cheese, so he can essentially go flying through the door and chase down any party members he needs to. However, the best tactics I've found for this guy will be to keep him in his room. Reading the module, this room is cast with a spell of darkness, making any kind of light just essentially diminish as it enters the center of the room. Players are not going to be able to know where they're at unless a dispel magic is done on the darkness. And even before they interact with the darkness, I normally try and grab a character and drag him in here. Um, let's click on Scentmere and show off some of his better abilities. So the one thing that I like to do a lot with this guy is his spider climb. I normally roleplay this room to be something like 40 feet tall, and he's like spider climbing up the walls and hiding in the corners away from the melee, essentially whenever possible. The other thing that I do to really strike fear in the opponents here, um, let's see. Okay, perfect. So on the unarmed strike, excuse me, on the unarmed strike, the vampire can instead grapple the target at an escape of DC 18. So that is normally how I would start this fight off. I would make the door eerie. I would say that there's holes in it, and they try and look through. They can't really see anything. It's extremely dark inside. Even dark vision's not working. And then whatever sucker is going to be the first one to kind of open the door. They are going to be grabbed by the vampire, grappled, and then brought to the ceiling of this dark room, where they are either going to be continuously bitten, or if the group pops the dark vision, you might just drop them from a 40-foot ceiling. You might just drop them from a 40-foot ceiling for just pure damage that way. The other ability that I like to do is naturally your party is going to stall in front of this door. Like if you describe this door correctly, they're going to be very hesitant. Even after they open the door, they're going to be peering into straight darkness. So essentially they're going to be nervous to walk in the room. That's the perfect time to pop Child of Night. Scentmere can see through the darkness. He sees when the door opens. He could probably even hear party members outside. And I've had a couple party members kind of pop me saying like, "Oh, well, the rats come in 1d4 rounds." Well, I'm sorry that you weren't aware, but this gentleman cast that 3 or 4 rounds ago while you guys just stood at the door and decided what to do as you came in. So try and get the rats involved. Try and get some help for Scentmere because he is rather squishy. If players can dispel the darkness, if they are like attacking him consistently, he will fall down rather easily. Again, the best tactics here will be to grapple party members, drag them into the darkness, prey on them that way, and then get your rats in the room as soon as possible for backup. And yeah, use that spider climbing to get away as best you can. All right, and the last fight that I am going to emphasize here today is going to be the Afridi Fight. Going back to the story, remembering the module as written here, these players are not supposed to escape. There's supposed to be no opportunity for these people to leave. And I emphasize all dungeon masters here to really not pull any punches with this fight. Like, make this extremely chaotic, make this extremely hectic. I have pretty much ended all of my campaigns with total party kills, and I haven't really gotten negative feedback on it. It makes sense story-wise, it makes sense enemy-wise, and then the one thing I might do is allow, one or two crafty players to either escape out the hatch in 9 or somehow muster their way out of the dungeon, just to give a little bit of story. But of course, they're not going to be able to leave with any weapons, or else these guys are going to go all out on these guys. Let's go ahead and open their spellbook. They do have a great spell suite for you to use, which is going to cause absolute chaos in your players. I guess one more thing before I do that. The book writes this as 2 to 4 Afridi and tells you to put them on your party as needed. What I like to do is 3. I think 3 is kind of the perfect number. 2, they can separate them. They can kind of kill them on their own terms, and they're not going to be as effective as if you just kind of had that extra brother in there. 4 would probably seem overkill because I've killed most parties with just 3. But if you want to be that kind of really evil DM, I would probably put my 4th guy right here at the exit, just in case they do kind of get past these 3 for whatever reason. They're walking out, and then it's just kind of like, no, you forgot the last brother. And that just depends on your DM cruelty level. But yeah, I normally play 3 Afridi, depending on what aisle they're walking down. Like, let's just take, for example, they're coming from the Vampire Hall. I'm going to have the Afridi kind of come down like this, sandwich the party here in the center, and essentially start combat from that point. I do play these guys like a massive wall. I emphasize to my players that there's no getting around these characters. You have to fight through them. They're simply blocking all exits. They take up the entire hallway, according to the monster manual as well. And then at that point, let's go and look at their spells, because their spells are really what's going to cause the most chaos for your party. So first and foremost, they're allowed to make a multi-attack with Hurl Flame. And that is an absolute truck. So it's a range of 120 feet. If you can have one Afridi kind of sitting off on the sidelines while the other 2 kind of block all exits, the one hurling flames is just, he's going to turn into a complete monster. It hits with a +7, which is normally like 50% of the time on level 7 characters. And then each hurl flame is going to be dealing 20 to 30 damage. Throw 2 of those at a party member. I've easily one-shot some random rangers and stuff that are floating way off in the distance, thinking they're safe. Just had Hurl Flame come in there and completely crush their dreams. The next spells that I'm going to emphasize are some of their once-a-day spells, and the main ones that you're going to be using, if the water's drained and you're allowed to use your invisibility, use it. It's a great escape ability. When you're free to get kind of low, have them in Viz, walk back, cast some Hurl Flames in a round or 2 after they've kind of gotten a safe distance away from the party. Major Image, I was reading it and it seems really interesting. Like, I wish that I could find a better use for my Major Image. It just doesn't really make sense with the way I run them. Again, I run them like a wall, like impassable, so it doesn't make sense for them to spawn an image on the inside. Like, I can't see players realistically falling for that, roleplay wise. But the 2 spells I would absolutely have you cast at this point is going to be your Conjure Fire Elemental and Wall of Flame. Those are your 2 most powerful spells. And with the Conjure Fire Elemental specifically, you can spawn it into existence as a concentration spell. It stays friendly to you, but these things don't have to be friendly to the Afridi. You can simply spawn it and then drop concentration and just have the fire elemental floating around. Because the Afridis are immune to fire, let's say you do kind of randomly roll for the attack target of the fire elemental. well, your Afridis are immune to their damage anyways. So if you can, have the fire elemental boxing in with like 2 or 3 people with an Afridi, just roll random on the 2 or 3 people and it's going to hit. So extra damage. Conjure Fire Elemental will just be sitting there. He's an extra body blocker, just kind of gets in the way, hinders the mobility in an already tight kind of mobility area here. So the other spell is going to be Wall of Flame. I'm going to open this up and just get the dimensions of this. So you can make a wall up to 60 feet long, 20 feet high, and 1 foot thick. So at that point, what I would do is normally I shoot it down the hallways. That's kind of like my favorite way to use it. Or if you'd like, you can also set up rings here kind of in the center. So the area for the firewalls would either be just kind of a straight pillar going down at somebody's face, or kind of a circle blocking all exits. But the Wall of Flame is going to cause chaos. You can put your Afridi kind of right in the middle of it. They can be walking through it. Doesn't really matter. They are immune to fire. So again, drop this on top of the party, have the Afridi tanking the party, and then yeah, have your party roll damage at the end of every round, basically. So Firewall and Conjure Fire Elementals are going to be their best spells, and then whenever possible, make sure you are hurling those flames at your party. So again, an extremely deadly encounter. Run it as a TPK. Come in with the intentions of killing your whole party. I promise you, like, they're not going to be upset because there is so much sweat, blood, and tears in that fight. Keep in mind, I guess the last thing I'll say for the Afridis, normally takes me about 90 minutes to run those, because what happens when a group starts realizing that it's going to be a total party kill? That's when you get all the ridiculous spells. Just a fun little story, like I was killing them all, and at the very last minute, the druid's kind of realizing like this is not going well, so he decides to cast his 8 pixies and try and polymorph these guys 8 times. Spoiler alert, they're great at magic, and they're going to resist like 90% of magic spells cast at them with a 7 int, 6 whiz, 7 charisma. So yeah, the fight runs extremely long because players start really digging into their character sheets and seeing kind of what moves are there. But people enjoy it, I think, because of that threat as well. So that's the dungeon, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I was trying to keep it as short and concise as I can. It looks like I'm going in kind of the 20-minute range, but I hope you liked it. I left my Discord information up in the top link. If you are looking for a dungeon master, feel free to hit me up. Or if you're looking for a game, possibly reach out to me on Discord as well. Any comments on the YouTube video are always appreciated. And there you go, guys. This is White Plume Mountain. I hope you use it to slay and make your player characters cry to their maximum there. And until then, guys, this is Gimpzilla, and I will see you all next time.